it's like there are things that you do that later you go, okay, that was actually important, but I didn't realize how important at the time. It was one of the rare moments in your life where you're standing there going, I need to remember all of this, because this is going to be one of those days that people are going to ask me about for the rest of my life.
So hi guys, Jonathan Graham here for Thinking About Guitar. We are sitting with an incredibly special guest, multi-platinum artist, multiple Grammy award winner. He's got one of the most distinctive voices in all of rock history. It's Mr. Billy Corgan.
It's quite the intro, thank you.
Now, I should have said as well, when you're not making incredible music, you can find you every week doing the Magnificent Others, which we were talking a little bit off camera.
Don't forget wrestling too. I have a wrestling company, the NWA. So we got wrestling, we got the podcast. A lot going on.
I'd love to chat with you for hours just about wrestling. We've only got the 15 minutes. Of course,
are you the Scottish? Who's the Scottish?
I'm Scottish.
Yeah, so we got Drew Galloway or Drew McIntyre, depending on his name. Good friend of mine. I was at his wedding.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So all love to Scotland.
Absolutely, he's done incredible.
Oh, he's unbelievable. Tall drink of water, as we say out here in the West, about 6'10".
Right.
Great guy, though. Amazing guy.
Yeah, he's doing fantastic. Just like yourself. Now, you're at NAMM this year because you've been working.
I've been roped in.
Is this your first NAMM?
No, I've been here 2 or 3 times before, but it always turns into kind of a weird meet and greet wherever you go. And I'm total gear nerd. Like, I would be happy to just go and look at all the booths and see what everybody's up to, but you just can't.
You can't do that.
It turns into a celeb sausage party. So, unfortunately, I can't do the gear nerding out.
At what point in your life did that shift?
Well, there's indie fame, which, 91, 92, people kind of start to know who you are, or you look like a musician, so people kind of stop and ask you. And then when Siamese came out, we were on MTV, there was that level of fame, and then Melancholy was like the other level, where it was total insanity. And then that's kind of, grown and waned at different times in my life. This seems to be one of those times again where I'm being recognized a lot, maybe because of the podcast. The band's done quite well the last few years, so you're kind of back in that thing where you kind of forget, and then next thing you know, it's like, whoosh, here come people. Yeah. It's fine, because at the end of the day, if you're in the entertainment world, people know who you are. That means there's something happening and it's working, but it's not always conveniently timed out. Like when you're with your kids, people get mad at me if I won't take pictures when I'm like walking with my 2 little kids down the road. Like weird stuff like that.
I did notice that myself. I mean, I've been going to see you playing shows for over 30 years. Saw you again last year in London. It was probably one of the biggest crowds I've seen from.
I think it's 26,000 that day.
Yeah, and
big crowd.
It's a whole new generation discovering the band.
Yeah, and just as cool, we played with that band Rocket. I think they're from Los Angeles, kind of a shoegaze-ish type of band. So you see this kind of great guitar music coming back around through the younger bands, and so it's our pleasure to also kind of help introduce some of those bands to our audience. A lot of cool stuff going on. I think as far as guitar world, not the magazine guitar world at all, lots of good stuff going on with guitar.
I did mention at the beginning one of the most distinctive voices of all time. You've got an incredible voice on the instrument as well. You were born with the vocals. What was your journey for finding the voice on the guitar?
Well, my father was a musician, really great guitar player. Played a flying V into a Fender Twin. Very much kind of a blues, but more on the rock side of the blues equation. So when I started playing guitar when I was about 14, my father was so good at the guitar, the bar was like really, really high. And so I knew that to play guitar, it wasn't as simple as learning a Van Halen song or something. Like I had to figure out how to play to the standard of my father, but also I had to have something to say on the instrument because my father was that type of musician. So from the very beginning, I just remember thinking like, this is boring, like C major. Okay, I know how to play a C major chord. I was like, this is boring. So I started playing things like C9 and leaving the high E string open. So now you're got this weird ringing, like what you would almost call like a shoegazy sound now. And that was the development of like, well, it sounds a lot more exciting when I do this as opposed to this, or things that Jimi Hendrix would do and kind of adapting them through like, let's call it the gain of a Metallica. So where Jimi Hendrix was like maybe a jacked plug C amp, now you're playing with like super scoop Metallica type tones, but you're playing those same kind of Jimi Hendrix open type of things. Yeah. And that was sort of what kind of took me down that road.
And then your sort of routine in those days, was the guitar never out of your hands?
So I was one of those sleep in bed with the guitar. I was playing at least 4 hours a day. I set a timer on myself, and so from the day I picked it up, it was 4 hours a day, every day, even if I was sick, even if it was Christmas, I played every day. I was just so determined to learn the instrument. And after about 4 years, that's when I started to thought, okay, I kind of got that part down. And then it became really a journey of figuring out what I wanted to say with the guitar. And then constantly having people saying like, oh, you play too weird, or why can't you play like everybody else, or something like that. So that became this other journey, which was like, well, yeah, why do I have to play it this way? Or I would try to play like other people and I just couldn't. So I had to figure out kind of my own version of things. And that's, I think, how I kind of just arrived into this weird combination of kind of UK style, new wave, alternative type of playing mixed with classic, American hard rock. Not that, say, Zeppelin's, but, the definition of Zeppelin in an American's mind maybe is different than it, say, would be in the UK. So those bands, whether it was, Humble Pie or Zeppelin or Free or Sabbath or Queen, was the riffing and all that, kind of combining it with this kind of open style of playing. And so, by the mid 80s, it started kind of emerged that I had this way of playing the guitar, and most people were very puzzled by it. And then I could play leads on top, which was, for alternative, was very, you weren't supposed to play leads. Totally against the grain.
It must have been a little frustrating, or well, both frustrating and also incredibly gratifying that there was so much pushback, and then once all of a sudden that's the fashionable thing. That's a weird balance to strike, isn't it?
It seemed like a long time, but I mean, I started playing probably around 82, 81, and then by 89 this amalgam of styles kind of starts to congeal, and when it did, and then the Pumpkins was already playing, it was like all of a sudden there was just this audience. Somehow what we were doing on the guitar was like people wanted it. For many years you were told, no, that's the wrong way to do it. Yeah. Suddenly it was like somebody flipped the switch and suddenly everybody liked what we did.
Did you always know though?
I always felt I would be successful, but I couldn't necessarily define what that meant. And of course people would ask, and you're a kid, you're like, I'm going to be on MTV or some stupid shit like that. It doesn't mean anything, obviously, but it at least gives you some sense of like, yeah, I'd like to get there. I'd like to play the local club or something. But looking back now, it was all pretty dreamy, because you didn't really know what the cost of doing all that stuff was. And then when you've been in the music world for, gosh, I think I started playing professionally 40 years ago.
Incredible.
You look back now, and now it becomes a little clear of like why certain things worked and why certain other things didn't work. And of course, back then it was very much about getting your name in clubs and working your way up and trying to get a record deal, whether it was with an independent or a national record company. Now, of course, it would, TikTok and, there's a whole different game for young musicians. It almost seems simpler, but it was harder in a different way. There was no email, there was no social media, it was all word of mouth. So your reputation as a live band was super important. It wasn't like you put some clip online that went viral. Like, Kiki Wong, who plays with the Pumpkins, I got to know who she was before she joined the band because she had a big social media footprint. She was doing cool stuff with the guitar on there. Ours was like sending out handwritten mailers, and it was just so primitive.
Well, it worked out incredibly. Of course, now you're working with Laney on the Supergrace Loudpedal.
So we have to do the product.
Well,
James Laney was just in here bringing this in himself.
He was probably getting you to sign it as well. Yeah. Now, it's not the first time you've worked with Laney. You've been playing Laney amps for quite a wee while.
Yeah, I got a vintage supergroup. Gosh, it would have been about 10 or 15 years ago. And it was that weird moment in my life where I was like, wow, I love Sabbath so much, but I never thought to own a vintage Laney amp until that moment. And then I did use it on some stuff. But I also sort of had that thing where it was like, I love this amp, I love this sound, but it doesn't necessarily always update into the modern world. And obviously Laney's done a lot of cool stuff in recent times with that in mind. So when I got into some sort of behind-the-scenes relationship with Laney, it was more like me calling them up and say, I'd like to help you if I can help you with anything, and they were sort of surprised by the interest. And that was kind of my thing, was like, can I help you bring Laney, at least in my version of it, can I help you bring what's so great about Laney, a family-owned company, into the modern world? You're competing against these incredible multinational corporations. We know their names already. So, is there things I can help you with, whether it's in product development or even just talking to people about what makes the company special? So, it's like an official, unofficial relationship, I guess this would be the first kind of official kind of businessy type stuff that we're doing. We've done a few other little things before, but this is first time I really put.
And it was quite a bit of trial and error along the way with this, or do you feel like they got it bang on straight away?
Well, you know, they did a lot of product development before me, and then they brought me in and they said, okay, this is where we think this is going. Here's what it is. I was certainly impressed by, let's call it, the idea that it's an amp and you can use it at home, sort of direct out. That, to me, for a young musician is like amazing. The price point's amazing too. But then they were like, okay, here's what we have. Now tell us what's wrong about it.
Yeah.
Like really get in and criticize it. So I remember being at their office playing for about an hour. And I started saying this thing and that, and we need to fix this. And so they really addressed all that. So I'm very excited.
Of course. Now, I know we've not got a lot of time. I couldn't not ask you, because knowing your music and your love for Sabbath, now that you've had some time to reflect, what are your lasting memories of the show?
Well, take a couple steps back. You know, there was a few days of rehearsal before the actual show. The vibe with all the artists was so good. You know, you play festivals and you'll see people you know, but sometimes some band doesn't like you, so it can be a little campy behind stage. Sometimes people act silly and say stupid stuff. The vibe was amazing. I mean, you're talking about the greatest rock artists in the world, like kind of assembled under one tent, all in tribute to Oz and the band. And so you just felt that spirit. And I was hanging out watching other people rehearse, and then they were hanging out watching us rehearse. And of course, Tom Morello put together an incredible lineup of people to kind of do what they call the supergroup segments. So I knew that it felt special, and I was like, wow, is this really going to translate? And then once the show started, I was like, wow, this is really, really magical, really beautiful. Of course, Youngblood, my pal, he went out there and just crushed it. And so many incredibly beautiful moments, and then, of course, Ozzy's last moments on stage. And it's hard to explain other than to say succinctly, it's like there are things that you do that later you go, okay, that was actually important, but I didn't realize how important at the time. It was one of the rare moments in your life where you're standing there going, I need to remember all of this, because this is going to be one of those days that people are going to ask me about for the rest of my life. Because it felt that special, and I kept thinking, this has to be translating out. And then, of course, once I saw the energy that came out of it, and here's the best part. Ozzy got the message. The band, Boys and Sabbath, got the message. They felt that love. And considering their journey, considering what they've contributed, considering all the great music, and the rise of their legacy over, like, say, the last 30 years, me as a fan, going all the way back to, like, 1974 or 5, to me, it was like, wow, this is just a dream. It really was amazing. Yeah,
congratulations on it. It was incredible. Look, thanks so much for taking some time, Billy. Hopefully we get to do this again, talk wrestling
anytime,
for an hour.
Anytime, yeah, wrestling next time.